Welcome to Ignite Your Confidence for women in leadership who want to speak up and stand out. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Here you'll get all of the tips and tools that you need to stand out with unshakable confidence. Let's jump into today's episode. Well, we have Kelli Thompson here today, folks, and this has been months in the making. So I'm super excited to have you on here today, Kelli, and I'd love to have you jump in and tell us who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. We made it. I'm
Yes.
Kelli. I'm Kelli Thompson, and I'm a women's leadership coach. I'm an author and I'm a speaker. And I'm on a mission to help women advance to the rooms where decisions are made. And so I've been running my own coaching practice since 2019. And I work with women one-to-one. I work with them in group training. I go into organizations and do women's leadership programs. And what else do you want to know? You want me to go deeper than that? Tell my background, or what do folks
Well,
want to know?
I love you and I are so simpatico in the things that we do. And I'm curious to know about your confidence journey.
Yes.
When you were young, is this something that you expected you would be doing now? So it's twofold. One is professional. I'd love to know that. And then also, is this something that, well, how does it give you life? I guess that's what I want to know.
Yeah. No. So when I was little, I was convinced I was going to be the weather girl on TV. So from the time I was a little girl,
Really?
I loved weather, talking about weather, studying cloud patterns. Like I was a geek. Like I read the daily newspaper so I could read the weather, and like I could get anything my hands on about anything weather related. So I went to college convinced, again, I'm going to be the weather girl on TV. And a couple of things started to happen. One, school was always really easy for me. And until I got to college, I started getting into some really advanced courses like physics and advanced calculus and all these sorts of things. Cause this is STEM, right? This is science and math. And,
Right.
you know, my confidence was really shaken by the fact that like I'm getting C's. I'm not used to this. But the other thing happened too is I started to think to myself, oh, if I'm the weather person, to make any sort of decent income, you're working the 6 and 10 o'clock news every night. And I'm like, I don't want to do the 6 and 10 o'clock news every night. I want to be home with my family. And so I quickly had to kind of find another major. And I'm like, well, I like political science classes because I was in one for my gen eds. And I'm like, I'm just going to pick that. So I go into business because literally I kind of just find the first company that will hire me in a bank, not the first company, but a bank that, or a company that would hire me that had good hours. And so I went and worked at a bank and they had some tuition reimbursement. I was like, I kind of like this. And so I actually stuck in banking. And, one of the things I think that's really important to note on my confidence journey was I didn't realize how silent I was
Wow.
until one day we were sitting in one of those all day strategy meetings. If you're listening and you work, you know what I'm talking about. And that meeting, we were after lunch, felt like the conversation was just going in circles. And I was just
Mm.
getting really annoyed. And I was just like, oh, we're hearing from the same people over and over again. Remember, we got a bathroom break and I go into the bathroom and I'm like, "Ugh, why am I so annoyed?" Because well,
Mm.
because we keep hearing from the same people. And I was like, who are we hearing from? Like, "Ugh, we're hearing from all the men in the room." And so then I thought to myself, I'm like, well, is there more men than women in the room today? And I was like, no, there's not.
Mm.
But, in fact, all the men were leaders. They were the ones speaking up. And I remember sitting in that bathroom stall thinking like, well, these women should speak up around here. And it's almost as if the bathroom stalls kind of echoed in and they were like, well, you could be the one to speak up. I'm like, oh, I can't speak up because but first I would need to make sure that I don't sound foolish. But first I need more experience. But first, maybe I should go back to school. But first. And honestly, I was 11 years into that organization. At this point, I'm like 28, well, maybe 30 years old. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've
Mm.
been kind of silent my entire career. I didn't speak up as much. Obviously, I didn't have a lot of confidence to speak up, but it was the first time I think I became conscious of it. And I realized that there was a desire to do so, but like something in my brain was like, nope, you need something more to do that. And I would say kind of that awakening, along with awakening to the fact that, dang, there's a lot of men that run this show. Where are all the women leaders? That was another like slow waking up of just some of the systemic issues and some of my own confidence issues that I really then had to work on throughout the rest of my leadership career.
And how did you do that? What's a tip that you could offer someone?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, one of the things that I really work on with women is something that I call my advocacy model, because one of the things that I tried to do, let me tell you about all the things I did that did not work. So I think sometimes what we tend to do, because this is what I tend to do, and I hear this from my clients, is we're like, oh, well, I'm going to go and pay attention to maybe at that time, the only other woman leader in this business and just watch her and study her and see
Mm,
how she speaks up. And I remember trying to just copy and emulate that person's style. But you know what? That didn't help. It just made me
mm,
feel more awkward. It made me feel more inadequate. And I continued to really just struggle and find my voice because I'm like, I'm an introvert. Like, I'm not going to be this bubbly, congenial, extroverted person. That's just not me. And if I try to be that, it actually moves me further away from what I'm meant to contribute. And so one of the things that happened was I had actually switched organizations and I went to go work for a technology company. And I thought maybe I'd worked on my stuff, but clearly I hadn't. We actually get purchased. And I have to go fly to San Diego to be part of merger and integration meetings. So I'm sitting there, I'm in this 3-day stretch of all day meetings. Here we are again. The universe is presenting me another opportunity. I sit in these meetings all day long. And I remember going home that day and I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what these folks are talking about. They're talking about shareholder equity and value and all these other terms that this company is using that I'm not familiar with. And I remember going home thinking to myself, like, I cannot spend the next 2 days like this. Like, I
mm,
need to figure out why I am here. Like, I need to find my voice in this room because I could see this pattern repeating. And so the first question that I asked myself and the first kind of bubble in my advocacy model that I talk about in my book is this, it's authenticity.
mm,
I knew that trying to copy someone else's style was not working for me. So I instead had to ask myself, what do I know for sure about me? And I
mm.
remember making a list in my hotel room that night on the little Hilton pad of paper and pen.
Love
Like,
it.
my boss wants me here. I'm here to represent training. I was the HR person at the time. I'm here
Okay.
to represent all of the people stuff that's involved in the change. I'm here because my job is to pay attention to all the things that are going to need training or education or communication, with the merger. And when I got really clear about like, what do I know for sure about me? All of a sudden, like I felt this weight lifted like, oh, I don't need to understand what we're going to draft to shareholders. Like that's the communications person's job in this room. Like I don't need to speak up on everything. I just need to know authentically, why am I here? And what are the unique skills and talents that only I bring to this meeting so that I can listen for those things when my time comes. The second thing in the circle, again, it's 3 overlapping circles, is alignment.
Mm,
Well, how do I say these things in alignment with my values? This is the how of speaking, because I think sometimes we struggle with when to speak up, but we struggle with how to say it. And
right.
so, a quick tip that I have in my book and that I give folks that I had to come up with was, well, how do I want to make people feel when I speak up? Like, what values are important to me,
Hmm.
that are going to guide how I say the thing? And I thought to myself, I'm like, well, I want people to perceive me in this meeting as curious, engaged, and practical. Like I'm going to offer some practical solutions. And so when I sat there, I'm like, okay, what can I do to remain curious? Well, I can ask questions. What can I do to be engaged? Well, I can be an active listener. I can take notes, listen for things that are going to impact me. And how can I be practical? Well, I can offer practical solutions at the time, right? At the right time with my level of expertise. So we have authenticity, we have alignment, and then the last circle is action. How am I speaking up on what is mine to say?
Mm,
And I think really like asking myself, what is mine to say? It can really help us pinpoint, I don't need to speak up on everything. And I think as an
right.
introvert, this really lets a lot of folks off the hook. Like, I just need to speak up on the right things. Although my extroverted clients flip that question, they say, what is not mine to say? They always joke, they're like, oh, I'll speak up on everything. And then I have all this project work because I've been yakking the whole time and people give me stuff. So it's a great discernment question of what is mine to say. And what's not mine to say? Where do
Yeah,
I need to allow other people to speak up? So authenticity, alignment, and action is just a great way that I continue to use. It's a model I use to write my book, to really think about, what unique perspective do I bring? How do I want to say it? And what is mine to say?
that's beautiful, Kelly. Wow. And when did you come up with that?
I started coming up with it when I was sent to that
So it was
merger
that particular
meeting.
time, like during
That's
that.
when
So
I
I mean,
really,
and is that when the
yeah,
whole model came together for you, or did it come in
I
parts? I think that's what I should have said that.
it came in parts. Yeah, so I
Okay.
really came up with like the authenticity piece in that meeting. And
Hmm.
I kind of
Hmm.
came up with some of like I thought about the other things kind of in that meeting too of like how I wanted to present myself. But I will
Yeah.
tell you that model really got codified when I started my own business because
Okay.
all of a sudden now I'm like as a business owner, like I have a mission, I have a stand to take, I have things that I believe in the world. And when I started to really write my book, it really got locked down because there's a million leadership books out there. So I
Yeah.
really had to think about what do I know for sure about me? What unique skills can only I bring the world and I bring the reader? How do I want to say it? And what is mine to say? And like honestly, what topics do I not want to address? Like what's not mine to say? And really following that model not only helped me kind of guide the topics that are in the book, but helped me write about the things in a certain way that made me feel
Mhm.
good. So
Oh, that's wonderful. I remember one of the things that I teach, because I taught myself this too, is to speak first in those awkward moments when you're on a call or you're in a meeting. Who wants to kick it off? And there's crickets. And I always say, be the one to say it so you can get it out of the way first. You'll be seen as a thought leader. And obviously, if you have something that is of value to add, of course. But I find that that is
yeah.
also a wonderful way to reduce anxiety because you don't want to be the person sitting there for half an hour thinking, everybody else is saying what I wanted to say. I
Yeah.
should
I
have said
love
this
that.
sooner. Yeah, that's one of mine. Well, tell us about what drives you, specifically what makes this work so rewarding for you.
Yeah. So, like I said, my mission is helping women advance to the rooms where decisions are made. And the reason why this is so meaningful to me, because I grew up in a small white Catholic town. All the administrators were men, right? And even when I went through
Mm.
school, and then as I started in corporate America, I always worked in male dominated fields. I remember we won a best place to work for working mothers, and I was like, well, that's cool because we have a lactation room, but I was like, it's strange because we have no women in leadership. And so, I remember just through my journey, it
Mhm.
really bothered me that I felt like my growth was capped at a certain level because I couldn't see people like me in leadership. And the other thing that became really passionate about it was because I was in human resources. The longer I was there, the more I started to notice some trends, especially in wages, some trends that, dang, men are kind of paid more. They're brought in for more. And when I was doing recruiting, I was like, when men put their desired salary on a job posting, they ask for a lot more than the women do. And when they
Yeah.
get on calls, they negotiate a lot more than the women do. And the other thing I noticed, especially when I was in HR, is like when women would be really interested in jobs, they would like send me an email and they're like, Kelly, there's this job on the posting board, but I only meet 9 of the 10 qualifications. And so I'm just wondering,
Oh,
do you think I need to go back to school? Do I need to get a certificate?
jeez.
Or like the guys would email and be like, hey, I saw that, John's hiring for this. What do I got to do to get in? Like
Right.
just
So
it
different.
was so different. And that's why I became so passionate. One, because I think organizations are more profitable, we make better decisions, we have more creativity, better belonging. And as I argue in my book, one of the reasons why I think there's a confidence gap is not because women need to be more confident. It's because we need more women leaders in the rooms where decisions are made using healthy self-advocacy, using, different ways of leading and being in the world. Like the ability to watch somebody who looks like you, research shows is one of the best ways to help women speak up, be more confident, et cetera. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it. Is because I grew up in the world that didn't have it. And I
Yeah.
saw the real impacts of it. And so it really became my mission to say, well, we need to get more women in these rooms.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And it's so I love our backgrounds just in general. Just we're all so complex, right? That because for me, I never had a problem asking because my dad taught me when I was 6 years old to negotiate at flea markets to never pay full
Oh,
price. So that was a really powerful thing that I've always, and I teach negotiation as well. But on the flip side, I had this mom that modeled that your voice doesn't matter because you have to listen to authority to tell you what to do. You need to ask for permission and all the other societal things that we're all contending with. And I find it absolutely fascinating that so I feel like, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this with women in particular. I have found because I feel like a lot of us feel like, oh, our story's so unique. And it really isn't all that unique a
mhm.
lot of the times. And I found that a lot of people identified with having the confidence on the outside, like me at the time when I was really exploring this, and yet feeling a lack of confidence on the inside. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, if you've had the same experience with the clients you've worked with, and if not, what's different?
So I have this joke that I say, it's not a joke because it's actually kind of real life, but this is how I quantify this. Every Friday night, my husband and I watch Dateline with margaritas. This is what we do every Friday night.
Fun.
And I remember thinking to myself, like, you know, all these criminals on Dateline sure have a lot of confidence in themselves that they're going to go and like murder their wife, collect the life insurance, and never be found out. I'm like, they could really benefit from some doubt. And one of the things that I talk a lot about with my clients that I feel personally and in my book is that, I think sometimes we forget that doubt is a normal, healthy human emotion.
Hmm.
And in fact, if you don't feel doubt, there are people who don't feel doubt. They're called sociopaths. And I watch them every Friday night on Dateline. But I think with the rise of the term imposter syndrome, imposter feelings, I think we confuse a lot of our everyday doubt for
Mhm.
imposter feelings. And here's what I know to be true for me and for my clients. Many of our greatest endeavors, our best projects, our best presentations have been preceded by incredible amounts of doubt. In
Hmm.
fact, doubt is going to be there and it's going to be present every time you stretch your comfort zone. I've interviewed leaders like Indra Nooyi, who was the CEO of Pepsi, Padmasri Warrior, who's a leader in Silicon Valley. And they have both said that, as they have accelerated in their careers, they felt incredible amounts of doubt. In fact, Padma said, if I stop feeling a little doubt and a little nervous, she's like, I know I'm actually not stretching myself enough.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I really talk about with women is, how do we just notice the doubt without criticizing it? Because we've never really been able to criticize ourselves into more confidence. How do we name it? How do we slow down and just name, like, I'm feeling doubt. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling
Yep.
insecure, maybe a little excited, and how do I just normalize it? Like, all normal, healthy people feel doubt because it keeps them humble, it keeps them connected, and it keeps them curious. It keeps them off of Dateline. And how do we just reframe that? It's like, I'm feeling doubt because I'm stretching my comfort zone. I'm
Yeah.
feeling doubt because I'm moving closer to my goals. And so, I really encourage women to say, it's not about overcoming doubt or never feeling doubt again. It's how do we transform our relationship with doubt? Because
That's
the actions of
beautiful.
confidence come first, the feelings come second. And I often say, like, confidence is a side effect of taking action. So, a lot of
Mm.
people who appear really confident on the outside are probably doing it while also feeling doubtful, overwhelmed, nervous, a little anxious, a little excited. Like, two things can be true at once.
Yes, absolutely. I talk about channeling self-doubt. So it's interesting. I love your perspective on that. So
Uh,
powerful. And I was writing this down as you said it. You can't criticize yourself into confidence.
you can't, but we try
Like,
really hard. And
it's
I'm
so
sure everybody's going,
true.
uh-huh,
It's
yep.
so true. Well, who have you thought of, like in your life, who has impacted you the most, or who is one person that you would be willing to share that has impacted you, and in what way?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have to pick one person. So let me pick my great grandma. I wrote about her in my book. My great grandma Elizabeth was born in like the early 1900s. And, at the age of 15, she went to go work in her dad's hardware store. And she was, started to learn about, math, customer experience, cost of goods sold, how much things you sell things for, what do they cost, margins, customer service, all things. She was very like, you know, um, shrewd, I guess you could say,
Hmm.
and women just didn't work in 1915. And
Yeah.
she went off to college, got married, survived the Great Depression. Well, her and her husband started purchasing land shortly after the Great Depression. He actually worked on the railroad. And so she was left to basically manage this ranch. It was a 1,000-acre ranch in Southwest Nebraska. And one of the things that's really impressive about her, sad but impressive, is her husband passed away in 1961. So
Oh,
let's roll ourselves back. So in
wow.
1961, women could not sign checks without a male cosign. They could not borrow money in their own name. Most women were homemakers. They didn't run businesses, let alone 1,000-acre farm operations. And so in 1961, my grandma had to run the farm on cash. So that meant she was buying tractors with cash, combines with cash. there's a bus actually that still sits on this farm. It's an old rusted out bus and it's like teal and white. It's got like rust along the sides. And every time I go out there, I think of her because I'm like,
Oh,
she had to buy that bus with cash because that's where she would pick up all of her workers and bring them out to the farm and everything. And,
oh,
I remember she was, she primarily raised my dad, and my dad told me, she was 4'11", and he would tag along with her to all the stores or whatever, because that was essentially his mother. And he said, oh yeah, he goes, she was this little 4'11" lady, she was small in stature, but like her personality was big, and she would walk into these stores and clients just wouldn't even the people working at the stores just wouldn't even like hesitate. They would just go get the manager because they knew that Elizabeth was there to negotiate to the bottom dollar because she knew her numbers so well. And
oh,
here's the thing, like she was probably called so many things. She was probably
yeah,
called witchy, bossy, assertive, rude, shrewd, out of her element, because you remember like men didn't negotiate with women in 1962.
right.
Their women were homemakers, right? They just followed the rules.
Yeah.
And when I think about her, I'm like, you know what? But because she was that way, she was able to feed her family. Because she was assertive, she was able to run this 1,000-acre farm and feed other families. Because she was shrewd, because she was bossy,
Oh,
she was able to run this entire operation on cash when women couldn't even like have money in their own name, essentially. And she was able to leave a legacy for her family. And that
wow.
really inspires me because I think a lot of the things that I've been called like too direct, too blunt, unemotional, not blank enough. And I think all of us can like take a step back and say, oh, yeah, I've always been called blank, whatever
Hmm.
that is, sensitive,
Hmm.
chatty, whatever. But what she really taught me was because she was that way, she was able to accomplish great things. And I think it's really helped me to reframe some of my own flaws as gifts, to be able to say, because I am direct, I was a really great HR leader because I could communicate really hard things to folks during really difficult times of change. Things that they maybe didn't want to hear, but they needed to hear because of what was happening.
Yeah.
I think because I'm unemotional, I'm a great coach because I can hold space for people without like
Yeah.
getting into all the stuff. And so she
Hmm.
really continues to inspire me. And I often like think back of her about if she was running a coaching business today, what sort of things would she be going toe to toe with on people, challenging norms, challenging conventional wisdom, challenging ways of being, and just reminding that there was somebody who did that even though she was called many things, she also accomplished great things because of that. And so I think that keeping that in mind is always really helpful for me.
That's beautiful. What a great example. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I would love to meet her, but she
Oh,
died when I was a baby. So
oh, but how cool that that story has such an impact on you.
yeah,
And
yeah.
well, and it's a great example for the rest of us. Let's face it.
Oh,
That's
it is.
amazing.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
really amazing. Wow.
I put it in my book and a lot of people are like, that's the best story. And I'm like, I know, for me too.
What would you say has, in general, been the biggest challenge for you? I know you've already mentioned, and thank you for being so vulnerable about your own journey. But anything else that you would say, hey, this is something I learned and I want to impart this to others?
Yeah. The biggest challenge for me, I think always is a little bit of my own self-censorship. So, I tell that story about my grandma, but me not speaking up in those conference rooms and me running my own business, like the constant self-censorship is always the thing. Like, oh, I have these ideas. Oh, but what if I say it and it causes conflict? And I don't know if I want to have the energy to deal with the conflict. I mean, just crap like that, I think we all
Yeah.
deal with. And I think the other thing kind of related to that is I've always really struggled with believing that I don't know enough yet. I need to do more research. I need to
Mm.
experiment in the lab. And I think, that really caused me to incorporate. I didn't realize it because I still got paid every 2 weeks. I didn't realize how much I was in my own head all the time, thinking I needed more research, more information before I could speak up or launch a program or something. But then once I moved into entrepreneurship, and you don't get paid every 2 weeks, right? You need clients to pay you. It became very apparent to me how in my head I am all the time, and that I can sit and input all day long and continue to research, but I don't output. And so I think just those two things combined continue to be a struggle for me. And I have to remember, like, get out of the lab and get into the world, get out of the lab and get into the
No.
world, share your ideas. Yes, people are
Right.
going to have to say something, but you can just let them be mad. And that dynamic and that tension is something I'm always working on.
That's beautiful. Get out of the lab and into the world. Again,
Mhm.
another quote. Well, is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that you would like me to ask or that you'd like to share?
Oh, I don't know. One thing that I always love to leave folks with is I think sometimes we get caught in this trap of we need to do more things to feel confident. But one of the things I would leave everybody with is actually, I think a great amount of confidence comes from saying no to
Mhm.
things that we don't want. And in fact, I think sometimes when we don't know where to start, it can be tempting to be like, I don't even know what I want. I don't know how to be more confident. I don't know what I want to create in my life, but I bet if I asked you, well, what do you not want? Most people can be like,
Yeah,
here's a list of 5 things. Okay, I want you to say no to one of those things and just
that's
notice
good.
how you feel when you step into your own power and start saying no. And, all of a sudden, like we feel a little more conscious, a little more intentional about saying no to what we don't want so we can create room for what we do want. And I think that really produces a lot of those feelings of confidence. So I'd start there.
Love that. I love that because I that brings me back to a memory of one of my very first coaches who said
Oh,
something similar. Who said, "Well, let's
awesome.
start with what you don't want." And
Such a
that
good place.
really is such a good place. So,
It is. It
have to
is.
reiterate that. Well, Kelly, where can people find you?
Yeah, the best place to find me is at kellyraythompson.com. I'm Kelly with an I, R-A-E. I've got some free stuff you can download based on what we talked about today on my site. Otherwise, connect with me on social media. I love to hang out on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I'm /Kelly Ray Thompson.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here today. Appreciate all of your
Yeah,
wisdom.
this was a fun conversation. Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap of another episode of Ignite Your Confidence. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. If you're interested in more tips and tools around confidence, please join me over in my Facebook group called Ignite Your Confidence with Karen Laus. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.